Ralph Mayer has been playing with Blacktown in the National League for the past few seasons and has been granted a clearance to play for Australs now that Blacktown have been relegated to the State League. Mayer was a star with KB United and was a member of the Australian Junior Socceroos who played in the Junior World Cup in '83. He's looking forward to linking with old teammates Howard Tredinnick and David Jones.
We haven't played together for a few years now, but I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully we'll get a win, and this could be the start of a very rewarding season for Newcastle Austral.
Another youngster to arrive back in Newcastle is Paul Kristevski, who only last week received his clearance from his former club in Yugoslavia, and he's keen to force his way into the top team.
Got a few players, Ralph's back now, and Bobby and Howie and all them are back, so we've got a pretty strong side. We should do well this season.
Coach Willie Gallagher is after a more disciplined display all round in the match against Sydney Macedonia, especially in light of the performance put up in the second half against Wollongong a fortnight ago. An excellent crowd saw BHP Australs lead 2-0, only to let Wollongong score 4 goals in 12 minutes to steal the match. Gallagher has worked intensely on the defensive pattern of Australs, and Mayer will add strength to the midfield and also defence.
Unusually for the flamboyant dame and dramatic dolly, they'll be silent as they lend a hand, and it'll be a plastic one at that, for they're two of the immaculately dressed fundraising figureheads, kitted out by 100 local groups, schools and businesses. The Festival of the Dolls is currently on display at Lake Macquarie Fairmount Hutton. Fascinated shoppers are placing their vote for the best dressed doll in cash. There'll be prizes for the highest fundraisers, but the ultimate beneficiaries from the parade, which culminates in an auction of these dolls next month, will be camp quality. It's expected that more than $10,000 will be raised.
On the eve of Anzac Day, the students from 43 Hunter schools gathered to remember the fallen. 59,000 Australians died in World War I, 8,000 on the shores of Gallipoli.
These men give meaning to the words of our national anthem. They helped to give us the freedom we now enjoy and take so much for granted. We can proudly remember them when we sing the words, "For we are young and free." And perhaps then we can also say a quiet thank you.
The students erected tiny crosses symbolising the tragic loss of life. More than 30 wreaths were laid on the war memorial. An older audience looked on, impressed with the youngsters' show of respect.
The sentiment expressed by the youthful speakers today is representative of the opinions of the youth of today, then I believe there's a future for the place after all.
All Australians will remember tomorrow for the 75th anniversary of Anzac Day.
While the film version was a multi-cast production, the stage play brings a stunning solo performance by the Sydney Theatre Company's Julie Hamilton. Shirley Valentine is a disillusioned 42-year-old Liverpool housewife whose children have grown up, and her life now revolves around her husband. While she feels unfulfilled, it's not a sad play or one about loneliness. Shirley is given the opportunity to travel, and through this she looks critically at herself.
And she looks at herself, and through this she makes a journey of rediscovering herself and liking herself. So you get a play that's full of life-affirming good things. So you walk out of it feeling really great about being a person, which is, I think, what Willie Russell's trying to say. We're fantastic, if only we know we are.
The playwright, Willie Russell, is famous for another work, Educating Rita, but Shirley Valentine is destined to become just as successful, and Julie Hamilton, who has played the solo part for 18 months, will go a long way towards making it another winner.
Because Willie Russell says things very simply, but it's not simplistic. He says quite profound things about us as people, and very wise and witty things. And so I think I've learnt a lot, and I've learnt more about the play, and I hope that I now have brought other levels to it.
Shirley Valentine is at the Playhouse until the 12th of May and comes highly recommended.
This is the 11th year that Legacy's Florence Foundation has sent 2 young representatives from each Australian state to Canberra for Anzac Day celebrations. But 14-year-old Timothy of Woodville and Bede 15 of Cessnock are the first non-Sydney youngsters to be selected. And it's an honour they're taking seriously.
It's a special honour for me because I was one of the chosen ones type of thing, and I feel real privileged that I was one of the 2 from New South Wales.
I'd like to have a look at Canberra, and I hope to learn more about what Dad did in the war.
Bede's father was a Navy veteran of the Korean War. He hopes to follow in those footsteps and join the Navy. And Timothy, already a member of the Air Training Cadets at Rutherford, aims to attend the Defence Forces Academy. His father was in the Air Force during World War II. The Legacy teenagers will both wear their father's medals at the Anzac Day dawn service and to the War Memorial before enjoying a tour of the capital city.
Council met last night to thrash out the details of a renewal plan drafted by Town Clerk Barry Lewis. It centred around the appointment of 4 key people: a renewal manager to oversee the entire operation, a community liaison officer, a general manager and a social worker. Of the 4 positions, only the liaison officer is assured of federal funding. The rest may have to join the council payroll, and it was this point that caused the most discussion. Most supported their appointment as soon as possible, but independent aldermen headed by John Tate were unwilling to commit ratepayers' money to the project and suggested delaying the move until state or federal funding was assured.
It simply makes good horse sense to say, well, this is what we can do, give us the funding. But if we run around saying, well, we're going to do it anyway, there's not much incentive to collect the money or to have the money handed over to us.
But they were the only dissenters and the plan was approved. Lord Mayor John McNaughton says fears that recent flooding could jeopardise Newcastle's chances of attracting government relief are unfounded.
The governments, both New South Wales and federal, have contingency funds for disasters. It's the same as any other contingency. Sometimes we have more disasters than others, but one thing you can be sure of in Australia, you're going to have a disaster. There's no problem with that. The Premier and the Prime Minister have been absolutely first class on all counts to do with the appeal and to do with the disaster. There is no problem.
Alderman Ashley Saunders also suggested an external audit of the Lord Mayor's Earthquake Appeal Fund as the only way to restore its credibility. Mr McNaughton agreed, but denies there is any problem with public perception of the fund.
This absolute nonsense about lack of public support for the fund is what I just said, nonsense. I move around this community talking to literally hundreds of people. There are a small number of rumour mongers, and of course when there are rumour mongers around, people take up the rumours. They are a minority group. Public support for the fund and for the people operating the fund is absolutely first class, and it will remain so.
A clear, starlit sky greeted the ghostly parade of pre-dawn ex-servicemen and women who assembled at Civic Park this morning. As the procession formed ranks under the cenotaph, it became apparent that this year's dawn service was a noticeably stronger gathering than on previous occasions. The 75th sunrise over Anzac Day cast its light on dozens of similar services throughout the Hunter. For some, the experience is a time-honoured ritual now. For others, like these children at Spears Point Park, the service was a new perspective. The promise of brilliant sunshine drew an early throng of onlookers who lined the course of the Newcastle Anzac Parade from Pacific Park along Hunter and Scott Streets to Civic Park.
It's the first time that you've come along to watch the parade?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's the first time.
Yeah, first time ever.
Also in the crowd, a scattering of veterans content nowadays to watch the parade.
Not today, mate. I've finished marching.
Newcastle's 4 remaining original Anzacs spearheaded the march in a fleet of taxis, followed by Australia's modern armed forces in another motorised convoy. The city's cenotaph, recently renovated for the occasion, mutely accepted the salute. Following were the banners and battle honours of Australian servicemen and women from half a dozen wars and seemingly countless battlegrounds. The march detoured along Scott Street, breaking from the traditional confines of the Hunter Mall and stretching out in a pageant of colour and sound before appreciative onlookers. Pipe and brass bands generally acknowledged the RSL's request to slow the pace of the march in deference to the elderly diggers. But the marchers made the distance in good array to assemble in Civic Park. The gathering around the cenotaph was again bigger than recent years, although the ranks of the First and Second World War veterans seemed noticeably thinner. Still, there were younger Australians ready to take up the cause.
This is my first year of wearing the medals. I brought them out especially for the 75-year centenary, and I think I'll wear them every year from now though.
As that first wave of veterans disappear from the muster, the meaning of Anzac Day appears to be undergoing a gentle change. This year, it seemed, the message of Anzac Day was green.
We require the same character traits to stop our environment being polluted, degraded and stripped. We must protect our native animals and plants from death and extinction due to disease and man's destructive actions. Our natural flora and fauna are an important and unique part of the Australian identity.
Despite the quest for new relevance, the core of the ceremony remains. Wreaths were laid by RSL clubs, local and state government leaders, heads of the armed forces, legacy and a host of other community groups and individuals.
The significance of this 75th anniversary of the Gallipoli landing hasn't been lost on the people of Newcastle. They've turned out in unprecedented numbers to observe the ceremony, and reporter Leslie Robertson found the same story in Singleton.
Well, Singleton's an army town, so Anzac Day holds a special place in the hearts of civilians and soldiers alike. In fact, the whole town turned out on this glorious autumn day to pay tribute to Australia's servicemen and women. It was an Anzac Day unlike any other in Singleton. Hundreds marched as proud flag-waving townsfolk lined the streets. There were more Vietnam veterans this time. As the years go by, they're filling the ranks left empty by departed World War I diggers. There's only 2 left in Singleton, but Cyril Moxham and Ab Hawkins enjoyed pride of place. Both saw action in France. Both lost mates in enemy fire. With a mixture of sadness and pride, the 2 old diggers joined veterans from World War II, Korea and Vietnam at the War Memorial in Burdekin Park.
It's been a grand day. You look back on your old mates and you know what they were. And there's only 2 of us alive now in Singleton.
Where we're going now, up to the RSL club, it'll be brighter. They'll have something to eat and medicinal purposes, a little drink. I had them only for medicinal purposes.
And you've scored quite a few kisses today as well.
Oh, Christ, I haven't finished yet. Well, I'll take them all as they come. Well, aren't you going to? Yeah, listen to this. She couldn't refuse me, could you?
Actually, 2 years in France and still one for the Mademoiselles. Further south, Rebecca Skinner caught up with Anzac activities on the Central Coast.
And here in Gosford, thousands have turned up in brilliant sunshine to watch our Anzacs march to the waterfront cenotaph. Those who could no longer march arrived in style in vintage cars. It was the second year running in Gosford that the 11th Flight Air Training Corps cadets led the parade along Donison Street to Memorial Park, with the Gosford City Band, Pipe Band and more than 500 ex-service personnel. Some of the diggers needed a helping hand, and others were there to support their mates and share the poignant memories. Memories that stretch from the world wars to Korea, Malaya, Borneo and Vietnam, and of friends who never returned. Wreaths were laid in their honour.
At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
And now over to Jodie McKay in Morpeth.
The Empire Air Training Scheme began in 1940, a program designed to produce 20,000 pilots and 30,000 air gunners a year. Today's musical tribute honoured the 250,000 young men who took part in the scheme, those who left Australia to participate in theatres of war all over the globe. The City of Newcastle Concert Band presented a nostalgic program of music from the 30s and 40s. The Dam Busters March was perhaps a direct tribute to the young pilots, but Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture provided the resounding finale to the afternoon performance. There will be one more concert at the Conservatorium tonight at 8 o'clock.
This pen of around 900 birds represents thousands of hours of work, a scientific experiment to market Australia's largest quail. In 1987, Charlie Scott took a calculated gamble, giving up on traditional forms of agriculture for a bold new venture. The Scott family had been running a dairy farm here on this land for more than 60 years. But 3 years ago, after a series of floods and tired of government intervention in running their property, they opted out and moved into the game bird business.
We hung up the gumbirds for the dairy, and it became a case of the game birds had to make the dollars.
Charlie converted milking sheds into breeding pens, brought in stock from throughout New South Wales and Victoria, and began a detailed program to develop a meatier bird. In simplistic terms, Charlie mated only the prime stock in the country.
The Australian consumer wanted a larger bird and wanted more meat on the breast to make it edible as such at a restaurant and to make them actually feel as though they had a feed.
On their Woodville property, the Scots breed 45,000 quails a year, weighing up to 330 grams each. That's about double the weight of the traditional bird. They're sold to restaurants in the Hunter, Central Coast, Far North Coast and Sydney. And at around $2 per bird, we're not talking chicken feed.
655 grams, 2 quail, super quail. There's nobody in Australia can outdo that.
The property has just invested $25,000 on a new complex growing pigeons. 30,000 birds are planned for the marketplace each year. Then, of course, there's the guinea fowl and Scobie ducks. The game bird industry is a multi-million-dollar business. With a boom in gourmet delicatessens and eating houses, Charlie and Caroline Scott are ready to pluck the market. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
The scene outside the Newcastle Workers' Club on the morning of December 28 last year was one of destruction and loss. Casualty and damage reports were flooding in from around the city. 4 months later, rebuilding is slowly erasing the outward traces of the quake. The National Trust and the Council are hoping that all demolished buildings will be commemorated with a marker, a small brass plaque bearing a description of the building and its use. Today, the first marker was presented to Trades Hall President Peter Barrack and Workers' Club Secretary Manager Wayne Dean.
The Workers' Club was a very big part of most Newcastle people's lives up until the earthquake. It is also the fact that the Workers' Club is going to be redeveloped, and very shortly the tangible effects of the earthquake are going to disappear from the city, and we won't see where the earthquake was. So we wanted to make sure that the general public in future generations, our children, their children, still remember that there was an earthquake in 1989.
Other sites to be marked during Heritage Week will be those of the Old City Council incinerator, the George Hotel and the Newcastle RSL Club. Anyone whose building, house or business was demolished can buy a marker. It's hoped the markers will help future generations gain an appreciation of the 1989 earthquake.
The first report came after Falcons coach Ken Cole allegedly hit the score bench timeout button vigorously, and referee Steve Bignell has reported Cole for interfering with the scorer's bench. But the real drama started midway through the final term as Cole and North Melbourne's David Graham became involved in a running verbal tirade as the match progressed. And it overflowed at the end of the game as, according to Cole, David Graham had one last verbal shot and it was on.
And it's on in centre court between Ken Cole and David Graham. This is very, very ugly and not needed. We've already seen one coach suspended. It's on for young and old, and this is an absolute shame here at the Newcastle Sports Entertainment Centre.
For his part in the post-match melee, Cole was reported by both referees and referee supervisor Ken Clifford, who will no doubt hear from the NBL. But the flamboyant coach is unrepentant.
I honestly don't think it hurt the game from the point of view that people saw just some emotional people letting all the emotion hang out, but they didn't see anybody king hit. They didn't see anybody kicked in the face.
The North Melbourne camp are treating the whole affair as a storm in a teacup.
Last thing we want to do is have it blown out of any proportion. I mean, these things happen when sides are, you're dealing with full-grown men. And, of course they're going to be competitive. Both teams want to win, and so they go out and play hard.
For Cole, there are no regrets for last night or his style of coaching.